Well, good morning. So good to be with you, and we experienced summertime this week. First day of summer this week, longest day of the year. I used all those hours, Mike. I used them all. Okay, all the daylight and beyond. So we've had a long week in the barn. It seems like working with animals and a lot of things going on, and we are traveling through our summer series this year entitled "Follow Me." And if you have missed any of these messages, I want to invite you to log on to our website or download the app or go onto YouTube and catch up. Because if this is your first time and you guys do a lot of vacationing, Living Faith loves to vacation. I love to watch where you guys go. I kind of live vicariously through you while I'm 95 degrees and sweating over our cattle in the barn, and I see you on the beach and nice and refreshed. It somehow makes me feel awful. But anyway, I like to see that. So if you've been vacationing and this is your first time here, you're kind of coming in halfway through the movie. And if you've ever come in halfway, guys, you ever come in halfway through the movie with your wife and you start asking all those questions, what's going on, and she finally says, "Will you shut up?" So I'm not going to do that to you. I wouldn't, but I would invite you to log on and catch up. If you saw any of if you didn't make it last week, and maybe your spouse did, and she's wanting to bury a statue. If you're trying to sell your house, and she's wanting to bury something in your yard, and you're really confused by that, you need to go watch last week. I appreciate the feedback. There were a lot of statue sightings this week, and so I appreciate the text messages and the pictures that I got this week. And if you're I don't know what he's talking about, then you need to be at church, or you need to make sure you go back and watch last week. So enough about that. Follow Me is the title of the series. And as we looked at this the first few weeks, and it's kind of have been our underlying theme throughout this series, is that in order to be a Christ follower, there's a couple of prerequisites that we've kind of established, okay? And the fact that being a sinner does not disqualify you from being a Christ follower. As a matter of fact, being a sinner is a prerequisite for being a Jesus follower. Okay? The people that Jesus invited to follow him were in some pretty rough situations when he invited them. Okay? We talked about Matthew being in a tax collector's booth was probably one of the lowest life people that the people looked at in that time, and he said, "Hey, come and follow me." So being a sinner does not disqualify you. As a matter of fact, it's a prerequisite. And the second thing is being an unbeliever doesn't disqualify you. It's also a prerequisite. You say, well, how is that possible to be an unbeliever and follow Jesus? All of Jesus' first followers didn't really understand or believe. Many times. Go back and read the story. The story is found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels. You'll find over and over and over again that Jesus said things, Jesus did things, and the result of what he said and the result of what he did was that they believed. So up until that point, what were they doing? Not believing, okay? There was lots of not believing going on with the people that were around Jesus, okay? But Jesus said, okay, that's fine. Come on and follow me. Come on and follow me. So a lot of them, it was all the way at the very end before they finally figured things out. So if you've missed, you need to come back and take up last week and in the last few weeks and kind of catch up. But this is week 4. And last week, we answered the question, if I choose to follow Jesus, okay? If Jesus says to you, follow me, and he says that to you, he says that to all of us, come and follow me, then our question is okay, where are we going? If I'm going to follow you, where are you going? Because I follow people before, and sometimes they take me places that are frightening. And so if you're going to ask me to follow you, then where are we going? And where is that question? And so some of you guys that have been around church your whole life, to ask the question, where am I going if I'm following Jesus, you may think, well, that's pretty obvious. If you're going to follow Jesus, it's in order to be a better person, okay? And the thing is that if you do follow Jesus, you'll be a better person. You will be a better person if you follow Jesus. Some of the best people that I know are Jesus followers, okay? Some of the nicest people that I know are Jesus followers. Some of the smartest people that I know are Jesus followers. Some of the kind of people that I just want to hang around with all the time are Jesus followers. But Jesus didn't really say, Matthew, if you'll come and follow me, I'll make you a better person. Peter, come on and leave your nets and follow me, and I'll make you a better person, okay? It was not a get better seminar that Jesus was leading. So it really wasn't about being a better person. Some of you might say, well, if you follow Jesus, you get to go to heaven. You're right, okay? Don't get me wrong, okay? Always know as we go through this whole series and any time that you hear me talk or preach, that if you put your trust and faith in Christ as your Lord and Savior, that your eternal home is with him in heaven, okay? That's truth. I'm not taking that away. That is the truth. But that is not what Jesus focused on. Jesus didn't say, Matthew, follow me and I'll take you to heaven. Peter, follow me and I'll take you to heaven. Nathan, follow me and I'll take you to heaven. That was not what he focused on while he was here. When he was talking about giving your life to follow Jesus. The thief on the cross didn't follow Jesus at all. He was just hanging on the cross and said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said, cool, today you'll be with me in paradise. You haven't done a thing. You just happen to be crucified next to me, and I'll take you to heaven if you believe in me. That's not what Jesus said when he said, follow me. So what is the payoff for a lifetime of following Jesus? We discovered last week that to follow Jesus for life gives us the faith to be able to have confidence to conquer all of our fears. All right? That's what we discovered last week. Regardless of our situation, regardless of what happens today, regardless of what happens tomorrow, regardless of what takes place in our lives, we can have the confidence and we can have the faith that we do not have to be afraid. Over and over and over throughout Jesus' ministry, he would encounter situations. Sometimes he would invite situations. I believe that he created situations for the disciples. We'll blow up a big storm, okay? We'll really rock this boat. And they're all afraid they're going to drown. And he said, why are you so afraid? Because I'm in the boat with you. I am with you. You have no reason to fear. So we realize that what we gain from following Jesus is we never, ever, ever have to be afraid of anything. Well, this week, this is a nice midsummer message because I know you guys have always had this question in the back of your mind, okay? And for some of you, it's got to be really, really thinking. And Living Faith is kind of, we're pretty laid back and pretty contemporary, so we don't get all crazy about this. But what, if you're going to be a Jesus follower, what do you wear? You ever had that question? I mean, what are we supposed to wear if we're going to be a Jesus follower? What do Jesus followers wear? And you're thinking, what are you talking about? I mean, we just wear whatever we want to wear. And we go, wait a minute. If you're following somebody, if you're following something, you wear certain things, all right? I know because I'm a Facebook creeper, all right? Actually, I'm not. Josh Corley is. He's my staff, so he takes, not really. I did a little looking on Facebook, okay? He's really a master at it, so be careful. But anyway, I did a little creeping on Facebook, and this is what I found, okay, about you guys and who you follow. Let's see what we got here. Uh-oh, there's our own little Christy and Miss Denise. And who do you follow? Yeah, see, no secret there, is it? We know who she follows. Louisville, all right? I did a little more creeping. Let's see, oh, look at there. Our newest family, the Millers. And who do they follow? Duke. And we still accepted them, see? That is, see, we are, for some people you may not understand, but we are an economical church, okay? We can have, yeah, you got that. I knew that would be for Steve. Because we can like Duke, Louisville, and the next slide. Yeah, that's me and Troy, okay? All right? So you know who we're following, right? I mean, we don't make it a secret. I mean, we just wear it right out there. There's been a lot of Golden State, a lot of Cleveland Cavs going on this week. You kind of look and you can kind of tell who people are following. Now, who's she following? You say, uh-oh, it was funny, and now he throws this up. Yeah, she's following Muhammad. She's following Islam, all right? She's an Islam follower. You can tell by what she's wearing. So you ask the question, well, what do Jesus followers wear? Well, you got this extreme. You got that guy. I don't know about that, okay? He seems to be pretty pumped up about it. But let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum. You ever seen anybody doing this? You ever seen any of those signs? You ever see any of those shirts? Okay? Yeah. Yeah, they're doing that in the name of Jesus. Okay? They represent a church. And this is what we want to talk about this morning. What should Jesus followers wear? All right? In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul wrote about what Jesus followers should wear. And he did this 2,000 years ago before there were buttons or zippers, okay? So it may make you a little bit afraid of what it's going to be, but I think you're going to find out that it's a little bit different. And the thing about what Paul wrote as we go through this, the thing you need to understand about Paul is Paul was at one time in his life, you've never read the story of Paul, it's in the book of Acts, okay? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those are the Gospels. That's the story of Jesus. Paul comes along a little bit later, about 20 years after. And what you need to understand about Paul is Paul was a Christian hunter, okay? So if you're kind of new to church or whatever, and Christians have been kind of really get on your nerves, then you may really associate with Paul because he really didn't like them either. And he was trying to wipe them out, and that's kind of what he did. He went from town to town, place to place, and it was kind of a new movement. Paul was a Jew, he was a Pharisee, and he was like, we're going to wipe this out, we're going to stomp this out. And in the process of Paul's travels and in the process of Paul trying to destroy Christianity, he became a Jesus follower, okay? But here's the thing about Paul, okay? He never met the skin incarnate Christ, okay? Paul did not sit with Jesus the way the disciples did. Paul's teaching, okay? Paul's teaching, and what Paul learned from the teachings of Jesus that Paul taught to us through his writings were learned from the people who got the teachings from Jesus, okay? So Paul knew Peter. And Paul knew all of these people that were connected with Jesus. Paul would have lived in the time when Jesus' mom would have still been alive. So all these people would have been alive. So Paul learned what he learned about Jesus from the people who learned it from Jesus. Okay? And so here's the thing. Paul knew what Jesus had commanded us. All right? So he would have had this teaching. He would have known this because he would have had a conversation with the disciples. And so everything that Paul wrote was in the context of what he had learned from the people who were with Jesus. Now, here's something that's very important to understand. If somebody is coming to the end of their life, okay, sometimes we know this, sometimes we don't know this. But in this situation, Jesus knew that the end of his life was very near. And when someone knows that they're coming to the end of their life, the things that they say and the things that they do are very important. Okay, because they're really processing through. I'll have a limited amount of time left, and in that limited amount of time, I need to very carefully communicate things that are of most and high importance. Okay, so at the Lord's Supper, at the Last Supper, when he gathered his disciples around, the night before he was crucified, okay, the night of his arrest, Jesus gathered his guys together. And this is a teaching that he shared with them. And the reason that he waited until right now, he had kind of communicated this over and over and over again. But this is like one of those things that, listen, guys, when I'm gone and after this is all over, he knew that they're going to be able to hang on to this, okay? And they had to hang on to this. And Paul would have been a student of this verse. And it's found in John chapter 13. And this is what Jesus says to them. Listen, guys, listen. A new command I give you. Love one another. Now, you've heard that before. That's not anything new to you, okay? Love one another. But he qualifies it, okay? He qualifies it. He says, love one another as I have loved you, okay? As I have loved you. Matthew, remember when you were at the tax collector's booth, okay? Remember when the Pharisees wouldn't even come around you? Remember when the people wouldn't even, you were so low life that they wouldn't even come into your house? But what did I do, Matthew? I loved you, all right? I came to your house. Nathaniel, you remember this, right? You remember what you said about me the first time somebody invited you to come and meet me? You remember what you said? I remember what you said, Nathaniel. You said, Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? I remember that, Nathaniel. But I loved you anyway. Okay? I loved you anyway. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So guys, listen, it's almost over. You don't get it, I know, but you're going to. You'll remember this. You're going to remember this. Love one another. Love one another. Okay? And then he goes on. And this is why. Okay? This is why. By this, everyone will know that you're a Jesus follower. Okay? By the way you treat each other, the way I have treated you. If you'll do this, guys, listen, I know you're going to forget this. I know it's going to be hard, but I'm telling you, this is important. It's about time to go. You got to get this. Love one another because it's the kind of love that you share with each other is what the world will see, and then they will know that you're my disciples. And don't forget that. So Paul would have had that. Paul would have had that knowledge. He would have understood that. And that is the mark of a follower of Jesus. We get this so much, and we hear that so much, that sometimes it just kind of becomes cliche in our minds. It just kind of rolls around and just says, yeah, love, 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 love. I get that. But we don't take it seriously enough, I don't think. And this is what happens when we don't take that command of Christ serious, when we don't make that the center of what we do in the church, when that is not radiating out of everything that we do, loving our neighbors and loving each other, when that doesn't take center stage, then this is what happens. The gravitational pull of all religion is always toward rule keeping. The gravitational pull of all religion is always toward rule keeping and away from relationship building. Because that gets messy, and that gets hard, and that gets difficult. But I can figure out how to keep the rules. When religion becomes about rule keeping, then what happens is we become self-reflective and we say, okay, I know I've messed up, and I know you'll forgive me, and so somehow we work out that relationship and say, okay, I'm okay with you, all right, God, you and I are cool, all right? But in that same moment of working things out with God, we look at someone else who has a sin different than ours, who has a life that's different than ours, and our glasses tend to slide to the end of our nose, and we begin to look over them to the point of saying, there's something bad wrong with you, okay? And we become judgmental. We become judgmental. When religion becomes about rule keeping, we come to a place where we're okay with God, but we look down on other people. Religion always gravitates toward tradition. And there's nothing wrong with tradition. We all have traditions. Religion always gravitates toward ritual. We do kind of the same routine. There's nothing real wrong with ritual. Ritual can be good. And religion always gravitates toward rule keeping. But for some of you, this is your story. Okay? For some of you, this is your story. For some of you, and you may not be here, you may be watching or listening. And the reason you're watching or listening is because you don't go to church, okay, or you don't come. Or maybe you're here for the first time in a long time. And if you're here for the first time in a long time, then this is going to speak to you because this is your story. You've been treated bad in the name of religion. You've been treated badly in the name of religion. Maybe they didn't have the sign. Maybe they weren't wearing the shirt. But they still treated you badly. And they were supposed to be a Jesus follower. They were supposed to be a Christian. And for some of you, you've got somebody on your heart that needs to be in these empty chairs. And you've tried to get them to come. And the reason that they won't come is because they've had a bad experience. Okay? Because they've had a bad experience. I've knocked on a lot of doors. I've talked to a lot of people. Folks, we've got 20,000 people that are not in church this morning in Ohio County alone. And the reason why most of them are not in church is because they had a bad experience with a church person. I believe that. I've talked to too many. And somebody that you're trying to reach, and it may be you, that's been rejected in their heart, in their mind. They've been rejected in the name of the one who died on their behalf. And Jesus says, this is so important, guys. This is so important to love one another like I've loved you, okay? To love one another like I have loved you. All religion gravitates toward rule keeping because it's easier to check things off of a box than it is to love somebody. Jesus said, love one another the way I have loved you. You see, for some of us, when we become a disciple, the disciple is the root word of discipline, okay, or vice versa. Okay, so we become disciplined in our discipleship. And so we become rule keepers ourselves. And we say, these are the things that I do. I pray every day. I read my Bible every day. I go to church every time the doors are open. I do these things. I check off these boxes. And in our process of becoming disciplined, we allow that to become a substitute for loving other people. The biggest obstacle, all right? Now hear this. The biggest obstacle, I believe, that you face in reaching unchurched people are church people. The church people that they have encountered in the past who have done it the wrong way. The person that they know, that person that you want to come, that you're trying to reach out to, the person that they know that knows the most about the Bible is the meanest person they know. Okay? Have you ever met like that? Yeah, that guy, whew, wow, he is some cat, isn't he? Yeah, but he knows his Bible inside and out. Yeah, wow, that's exciting, isn't it? You see, it's not about rule keeping. It's not about head knowledge. All religion will gravitate toward rule keeping, and it will gravitate away from relationship building and maintenance because that gets sticky, and that can be tough, and that can be hard. So 20 years passes from these words. 20 years passes from these words that Jesus left with his disciples that is supposed to be the underlying framework of everything that we do. And then Paul comes along, okay? Paul comes along and becomes a Christian. And so he observes what is happening in the churches that he has planted. Okay? Paul was a church planter and a missionary, and he traveled all around the Mediterranean rim. And he did this in a time that you wouldn't even, Paul sailed on boats that you wouldn't even get in on dry land. Okay? Paul did things that are just frightening when you look at it. And these are the things that he planted these churches. And when Paul planted these churches, Paul observed in those churches that very thing that we're talking about, the gravitational pull away from loving one another to rule keeping. And so Paul would see this happen. And as he would see this happen, he would write letters. And he would write letters of encouragement to them and say, these are the things that you guys need to do. And what's so awesome is that we have a copy of those letters. And we're going to look at one verse today that Paul wrote. And here's the thing about this. Paul understood the teachings of Jesus, and Paul wrote about those teachings of Jesus in ways that we can hang on to, in ways that we can grab hold of, in ways that we can apply to make things happen. So in chapter 3, in verse 12 of Colossians, this is what Paul tells us that we should do to be able to live this out. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves. And there it is. What are we supposed to wear? Okay? It's not what you thought it was, is it? Okay? He says, clothe yourselves. This is what you need to put on. And then he begins to list the big five. Okay? He begins to list the big five. If you are a Jesus follower, then you are to mentally put these things on. And the first is compassion. How do you clothe yourselves in compassion? The idea of compassion, this is what compassion is the idea that you are able to feel what other people are experiencing. Okay? That's what compassion means. That you are able to feel what other people are experiencing. I learned this way back, okay? I learned this way back. You know, I've been teaching for 25 years, and I remember back in the classroom, Mr. Bennett upstairs in room 214, this young boy came in, and he could barely hold his head up. I mean, he was so sleepy. And I've seen teachers with kids who sleep in class say, you know, go to the office or write them up or whatever. And I'll never forget Mr. Bennett coming up on that desk, and the old boy he was just falling down. And Alvy got down and looked at him like this. And he said, "Coon dog treed late last night, didn't she?" He said, "Yeah, Mr. Bennett. On the other side of the creek, we had to walk all the way around to get her. Her daddy had killed us." He said, "Just take a nap, son. Just take a nap." That's compassion, okay? That's compassion. He understood what was going on in that young man's life. He understood what was going on in that young man. You know, when we talk about feeling things in our heart, okay? The Greek language is a little different than that, okay? If you feel things up here in your chest, you might want to call 911, okay? But because the Greek language says that you feel it in your bowels, okay? And you might not want to put that on a Valentine's Day card, okay? That I love you, and I feel it in my bowels. But this is what you need to understand. It's a gut feeling, okay? It's a gut feeling. When you hear something has happened in someone's life and it kind of doubles you over, when you hear that something is taking place, when I got the call this week that Mike's mom had died in Florida and I couldn't go be with him, that's a gut thing, okay? It's a gut thing. When I got the word that Gina had relapsed with MS and she's back in a wheelchair, it's a gut thing, okay? WO, when we get those emails from you guys with what you're going through, when we get that, it's a gut thing for us. It hurts us. We all experience it together. That's compassion, okay? That's compassion. Okay? And you guys know. You guys know. The fact that you feel what others are experiencing. And here's the other thing, and this steps out just a little bit, okay? Some of you guys are going through things that you can't, you know, there's nothing, you didn't invite it, you didn't ask for it, it just showed up, okay? But sometimes we see people go through things, and it's like, the glasses start to slide down the nose because you could have prevented this, all right? I told you 3 times not to do that, and now you've done it, and now you're dealing with it. You see what happens? It's harder than to have compassion, doesn't it? You got to slide them back up, you see. Because Jesus says, love one another as I loved you. Matthew, at the tax collector's booth, you know you're sick, okay? You did it for the money, didn't you? The money was good, wasn't it? You see, I know that. I know you didn't have to say yes to that, but you did. But I loved you anyway. I loved you anyway. That's compassion. Paul says we're supposed to put on a big coat of compassion and that Jesus' followers should wear it. The second thing that he points out here is kindness. Kindness is when you loan your strength to someone else. When you loan your strength to someone else. When someone else is hurting and they can't do things for themselves, it's when you bake a cake, okay? It's when you bake a pie. It's when you take food. It's when you do something that you're loaning your strength to someone else. When you do, you say, I can't heal that. I'm not a doctor, but I can make beans, okay? And so here you go. It's kindness. It's kindness. It's what we do. It's when we are able to lend our strength to other people to help them through something tough. It's loaned ability and it's loaned strength. Then he says humility. Humility in relationship to other people and in relationship to God. Humility is viewing yourself accurately. Okay? Humility is viewing yourself accurately. And I think that's very important to understand because there is an equality among human beings. All right? There is an equality among human beings. Now, there's a lot of folks out there that can do a lot of things that I can't. But the equality in human beings exists in the fact that we come into this world naked and we will leave the same way. And we will leave the same way. And none of us knows when that is going to happen. And what makes me special is the same thing that makes you special. Is that God loves you. And God made you. It's the same thing that makes me special is what makes you special. And that is that God loves you. You are loved by God the Father. It's not how talented you are. We have to put on humility and be humble. Paul says that when you interact with others, I want you to come across in such a way that what makes you special, okay, is what makes them special. And that's so important. It's so important. Then he says gentleness. Put on gentleness. The decision to approach someone based on the situation they are experiencing and not based on your credentials. I'll never forget the day after Michaela was born, 13 plus years ago. I'll never forget that morning because in that day that she was born was one of the most, the day Taylor was born was just one of those days that we filmed the trip to the hospital and there was no real bumps in the road. Sandy went into labor and then she gave birth and she was, just a beautiful baby and away we go. And Michaela was beautiful, but the process of getting her here was more complex, okay? In the process of Michaela coming into the world, in just a few short hours, I was faced with two distinct possibilities. The possibility that we could lose her and the possibility that we could lose Sandy. Because when Michaela's cord got crimped and her numbers crashed and she had oxygen levels down and she had heart rate down, then you're faced with the fact that based on what I'm reading on this monitor, my baby's dying. And unless somebody intervenes, unless God steps in, we've got to do something. Okay? And then after she was born, Sandy crashed. Lost all color in her face, blood levels was way down. And you start remembering and seeing and knowing that we've got a problem here. And so that's a tough day, all right? And I remember that night, you guys remember the old hospital across the way that is no longer there in Owensboro, and they used to have the little beds in the window, and the mattress, the little cushion. Some of you guys have slept on the 2-inch foam mattress in the window. So I slept in the window that night, and when I woke up that next morning, Dr. Danhauer was sitting next to me. He woke me up. He just kind of sat down. And he wasn't my doctor. He was my daughter's doctor. He's Michaela's doctor. And being dad, I got one eye open. I'm like, that's Dr. D. He's sitting next to me. And I'm like, hey, man. I said, how's Michaela? He said, oh, she's fine. He said, she's got nurses all around her. He said they got a great staff down there. I said, Sandy. He said, oh, she's got a whole staff of nurses. He said, I was just worried about you. He said, nobody checks on the dads. He said, I know what it's like to sleep on this 2-inch foam. How you doing? And I was like, it's been a pretty rough day, Doc. He said, that's okay. He said, you'll be fine. He said, everything's going to be fine. And I appreciated that so much Because he could have come to the door and said, "Hi, I'm David Danhauer, and I am, I got my license at the University of Louisville School of Medicine, and I did my residency at Coast Guard Children's Hospital, and I've done work at Cincinnati, and my credentials are such that you wouldn't believe how wise and smart I am." He didn't do any of that. He just sat down and said, "How you doing? How you doing?" Gentleness. Gentleness is bringing ourselves to the level of those who we are talking to. Gentleness is the difference of holding a contact lens on the end of my finger as opposed to gripping a baseball in my hand. I am capable of both, okay? I am capable of both, but it's my decision as to how I handle it. So when your approach with situations, the way that you handle that situation, the approach that you make, the gentleness that you choose, okay, goes a long, long way in the response that you will receive. Gentle people gear down. Gentle people gear down. Our relationship, that's what it says. Our relationship is more important than you being impressed by me. Great teachers are gentle in their nature. Great teachers are gentle in their nature because they can gear down to the place where you are and bring you along, okay, to where they need you to be. Gentleness. And that goes hand in hand with patience. Patience is choosing to go at the speed of another person, okay? Patience is choosing to go at the speed of another person. Now that for some of us is very hard, okay? It's hard for me, don't get me wrong. I spent the last 48 hours in 94-degree heat with teenage girls dealing with livestock, okay? Patience can be tested, all right? Patience can be tested. Animals will test you to the very end of your edge, okay? Patience will test you. Animals will test you. People will test you. But practicing patience, okay? Practicing patience. I'll never forget, just a few weeks ago, we were at Muhlenberg County Fair. And this is what we teach animal etiquette, and we teach all of these things about how we're to treat animals and how we're to take care of them and animal husbandry. And so we had 4 lambs in a trailer, and all 4 of those lambs needed their Kentucky Proud tags in their ear. And now, if you've never had this, if you've been to an ear piercing, okay, if you've ever had your ears pierced or you've witnessed somebody getting their ears pierced, when you put tags in animals' ears, it's times 10, okay? It's a big old needle, and we have a big old pair of pliers, and we're really fast, we're really quick with it. We just snap it and goes, okay? But it does put a hole in the ear. And so we had to put these 4 tags in. And so we're bringing the lambs off the trailer, and my good friend Steve Hatfield over in McLean County had the tagging gun, and I handed him the tags, and we pulled the lambs out, and he put the tags in. And we got to the last sheep, and I had her around the neck like this, and I'm holding her real tight. And just as he clamped down on the tagging gun, she took her left hoof and went, and she just dug those pointed hooves into my sock and into my shoe and into my foot, and just put a stomp on me. And I'm standing there on the back of that trailer, and I'm thinking, this is a point where I can go into a complete fit, okay? I could kill this lamb with my bare hands at this moment, okay? And I have a choice to make. Gentleness and patience or complete high-speed come apart, okay? And instead, I just grabbed that lamb and I just hugged it, okay? And I just held onto her head, and I was like, you are killing me. And when we get home, but anyway. So I let her go, and she got her tag, and away she went. It's a choice that we make, okay? And Paul says, these are the things that you are to wear. These are the things that you are to put on every day. And listen, he says, listen, do it in this context. Let's look at the second half of that verse as we kind of wind this up. Colossians, okay, the second half of that verse says this, forgive, all right? Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Okay? Forgive as the Lord forgave you. That is the backdrop that all of this sets on. Paul says, I want you to be all of these things the way God was with you. Okay? Remember that. That's how you put that into that context. When you're looking at somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, I've told them 100 times not to do that. I've told them 1,000 times not to do that. We've had this conversation. And then you need to remember that Jesus says, I was compassionate with you. I was compassionate with you, remember? Okay? And when you get really frustrated, then Jesus says, remember, I was kind to you. Okay? I could have thrown you out of the boat. Okay, Peter? Peter, I could have let you sink and drown for your lack of faith. But I helped you up. I was kind to you. I was kind to you. All right? Remember that. When you place where you're just, just struggling, God says, I was gentle with you. I was gentle with you. God says, think about it. Come on. God says, come on. Think about how patient I have been with you. You can't have patience for them. You can't have patience for him. You can't have patience with her, but yet I've had this much patience with you. Come on. Come on. Put on a cloth of patience. Okay? Put on your patience t-shirt. You can do this. You can do this. It's follow wear. All right? It's what we wear. It's follow wear. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. How in the world can I do that and get anything done? Okay? How can I do that and get anything done? All right? Because if everything I do is just compassion and kindness and gentleness and patience and, how do we get anything done? I understand that. I understand it can be hard. It can be really hard. But what gives this message credence is Paul. Okay? Paul endured unbelievable circumstances. Like we said earlier, he was shipwrecked and snake bit, and he did everything without electricity or Motrin. Okay? I mean, he did it all without those things. So you can make it. But understand something. It doesn't come natural. It's not who we are as human beings. It's not who we are. Paul says, clothe yourself in these things. Clothe yourself in these things because it doesn't come natural to us. And Jesus understood that. You see, here's something to understand about Jesus. Jesus didn't come to earth to make a point. All right? He did not come to earth to make a point. If he just came to earth to make a point, he could have done that in about 15 minutes. All right? Because God has that ability. When he shows up on the planet to make a point, he can make a point real fast. So if Jesus just came to make a point, he would have come and made a big point and left. Jesus came to make a difference. He came to make a difference. So he camped out with his guys. He camped out with those disciples for 3 years, teaching them all of these things over and over and over again. Compassion, humility, kindness, gentleness, patience, over and over and over again, demonstrating for them over and over and over again. He could have abandoned those guys. He could have fired those guys. He could have left. There's so many times. But instead, over and over and over, compassion, humility, kindness, gentleness, patience. You are called to make a difference. If you are a Jesus follower, then you are called to make a difference in someone else's life. You're called to make a difference. So this is my challenge for you. Because the reason that we have 85% unchurched people in this county, and I believe this, the reason that we have 85% unchurched people in this county and every county in the state, it's not Ohio County, okay? We're actually a little better than Eastern Kentucky. They're about 90% unchurched. And this is what I believe. Because you think, well, wait a minute. We've got 40 churches in the county. Yeah, I know that, okay? Now, I picked on George Chin this morning because George tells us stories about going to other countries where there are no churches. And George goes to places and he's knocked on doors and people have come and he shared the message of Jesus and they look at him and go, oh my gosh, I've waited my whole life to hear that truth. But we've got 40 churches. You can't drive. You can't go anywhere in this county and not run into a church, okay? I'm a big old boy, and I can't go anywhere, but I can almost run from church to church in this county and take a break between each one, okay? Because there are so many of them. And this is what I believe. I believe that 85% of the people are unchurched because they have encountered too many half-dressed Christians. And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about people who don't practice compassion, who don't practice humility, who don't practice kindness, who don't practice gentleness, and who don't practice patience. And when you've encountered a half-dressed Christian, it'll leave a mark on you. It'll leave a mark on you, and you won't want to go to church. And you won't want to, and I can tell you this. I know this. We have people in this church who one spouse comes to church and another spouse doesn't. And when I dig and when I start asking questions, that's what I find out, is that their spouse had a bad encounter with a half-dressed Christian. And I haven't figured out how to completely overcome that yet, okay? So if you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all. Give me a chance, okay? Give me a chance. Don't be a half-dressed Christian. Half-dressed Christians have a routine down. They have what they think are right words, but they're just not dressed right. So this is my challenge. Every day when you get up, put on the right clothes, okay? Put on the right clothes. I don't care what you, okay? But clothe yourself with compassion. When you're encountering those people, okay? When you're encountering, see, I deal with young people every day. I deal with young people, and I you know, I was young. I live on very limited sleep, okay? And I don't understand when that happened. I really don't know how I can sleep 3 to 4 hours and then I can wake up and go 18. I don't know how that happens in my body. I don't know how I can do that. But it's just how I function. But I was a teenager once, okay? And I know that teenagers don't do that. Teenagers do not function on 3 hours sleep. And the more you make them function on 3 hours sleep, they will fall apart on you, okay? And I deal with them every day. And so when they're in that kind of a rhythm, when they're in that kind of a world, then they will just, and what happens is your compassion gets about that thin, and then all of a sudden kindness starts going out the window, and gentleness flies away, and then you have no patience, and then you're screaming, get up, okay? Paul says, wait a minute. Jesus says, hey, I think you were a teenager once. I think you remember that. And so you need to put on some compassion clothes, okay? You need to wrap up a little suit of kindness here. You need to have a little more gentleness, okay? Now, I made 4 trips to the hotel yesterday to get my girls up, all right? I'd go back and forth to the barn and do what prep work needed to be done, and I'd come back, and slowly but surely, they come along, okay? Finally, the 8-year-old, she popped her head out of bed and said, okay. I said, are you going to get the rest of them up? She said, hey, when I finally get up, I'm a bouncy house. She said, I will roll over them until they come out of bed. I said, that's what I wanted to hear, darling. Get them up. And then away we went. Kindness, compassion, humility. Put it on every day. Because here's the thing. When you can practice that, okay, when you can truly practice that in every aspect of your life, whether it's with your employees, whether it's with your staff, whether it's with those that you are watching over, okay? Some of you guys are in supervisory positions and you have guys that work under you, okay? When you can do that, okay, when you can do that, you can make a difference in their lives, okay? You can make a difference in their lives. And here's the thing. When you do it the right way, amazing things can happen. Amazing things can happen. When you do it the wrong way, nobody wants to be a part of that, okay? Nobody wants to be a part of that. And that fact is shown over and over and over again. So make a difference. Make a difference in someone's life. One more story and I'm going to close. This just came to me. When I was a young boy, when I was 16, 17, and wasn't 60, 40, 30, 100, whatever overweight that I am, I used to work in hay a lot. And, you know, this time of weather is tough. When you're in the top of a barn, some of you guys have done that, and when you've been in the top of the barn, your back of your neck is right up against the tin roof of a barn. You're working in hay. That's rough, okay? If you've never had to do that, God bless you, okay? Because it's rough. And some of you guys have done tobacco and been in the same situation. But I worked for a guy one time, and he was one of the meanest fellas that you ever knew. And I mean, he was a slave driver. I mean, he wouldn't have water for us, and he would dock our pay when we rode the wagon to the barn, okay? And I'm thinking, he would take that time off of the hours that we worked when we were just riding the wagon. And I worked for him once, okay? I worked for him once. The other guy that we used to work with in Hay, this was his thing. He wouldn't even be with us. He'd say, okay, guys, listen, hey, it's hot out here, okay? And I know it's hot, and I know you guys are hot. And he said, you guys work, and when you get hot, you stop, and you take a break. And if you get too hot, you drink plenty. And if you don't have anything to drink, he said, you go up here to the store, and you buy whatever you want to drink and get whatever you want to eat, and you put it on my account, okay? And you charge it to me, and you stay hydrated. And when you get too hot, you sit down and take a break and get that hay in, okay? And if you need anything, call me. Listen, hey, we worked harder for that guy. we seldom took a break, but we worked harder for him than anybody because he practiced compassion. He knew it was hot. Now, he was riding around in his truck cab like but he didn't say, I'm in air conditioning. You guys maybe get there someday. He said, I know it's hot. Take a break. He practiced kindness. He offered us. I never once ate a sandwich on his account. None of us did. None of us did. I never bought a single drink on his account. But he had the offer was there, okay? The offer was there. The kindness was there, okay? He understood where we were. He was humble in his approach. He was like, I know it's hot. We're all there. And he had patience with us. He didn't come back and say, boys, y'all should have had this whole field picked up by dinner. He never once did that, okay? When you practice those things, it makes a difference in people's lives. And I'd do anything for him, okay? And that's what God tries to tell us. He's like, look, if you'll just love people, they'll love you and they'll love me because they'll know, okay? They will know who you follow by the way you love and care for one another. And because of that, he made a difference in my life. And because of the way I was treated by people like him, I try to make a difference in other people's life. And my challenge to you is, go and make a difference. Let me pray for you. Father, we thank you so much that you loved us. We thank you so much that you wanted us to love one another. And Father, Paul was able to flesh that out for us so that we could understand. You gave him the words. You gave him the definition that we need to be able to know what that looks like. That we need to put on compassion. There are people in this church family that are going through circumstances in their lives that some of us truly can't understand. But we know that it hurts us. We know that it makes us double over. We feel it, Father. Father, help them to know the compassion that we have. Father, help us to be humble. Help us to be humble. Father, based on all of the gifts that you've given us and the talents that we have, none of that matters. We come into this world naked and we leave that way. And Father, the only thing that makes us special is that you loved us and you loved us all. Father, help us to be kind. Help us to be kind to one another. Father, help us to be patient and gentle. Help us to have a gentle and patient spirit with those that are around us. Father, there are so many people in this world. There's so many people that are right around us, Father, that are not a part of a church family. And what they really want, Father, is a place to belong and a place to be and a place to feel loved and accepted. Father, our prayer is that that can be this place. But Father, it won't be if we're a bunch of half-dressed Jesus followers. We need to put on compassion. We've got to put on humility. We've got to put on kindness. We've got to put on gentleness. And we've got to practice patience. We've got to clothe ourselves and forgive as you forgave us and to love as you loved us. Help us to be a true follower of you. We pray now, Lord, that you would guide us in this time of reflection and invitation. Whatever decisions we need to make, guide us to make them now. Help us, Father, to make a difference. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.